Alright guys, today I'm going to be doing something a little different. This isn't going to be a video of me playing. I'm not going to be doing a deck tech. I'm not going to be showing you a new strategy. I'm going to talk to you about an alternative ideas for playing a format that is similar to Commander. It was brought up in a thread on the website that I currently post on called mtgsalvation.com if you're not familiar with it. How would you try to balance a format so that it's kind of like Commander, but it has more competitive balance to it? And my initial thought on this, and I stand pretty firm by it, is that in multiplayer, and this is probably the crux of trying to balance it, doubling the life total is probably the most degenerate thing as far as balance between archetypes that ever happened to Commander's design, aside from the fact that having a Commander, which I think that's pretty core, and taking the Commander away would kind of just defeat the purpose of the whole thought exercise. But I firmly believe the first thing you need to do is bring the life totals back down to 20. Not 25, not 30. And this is mostly because I feel like aggro must be a player in the metagame to naturally balance the games. Just looking at random cards here, I didn't even search anything. Let's look at this card ad nauseum. Anyone who's ever played with this card in Legacy or Vintage or any other format knows that your curve has to be incredibly low to make this card broken. In a competitive game of Commander right now, ad nauseum is one of the most broken cards you could ever possibly think of. In fact, in the Storm deck I currently run, if I play it in 2-on-2, where you get a combined 80 life total here on MTGO, I almost take no other line other than tutor ad nauseum. That's not how the deck typically plays when I just pilot it normally in a one-on-one or a multiplayer game, because my life total is now quadrupled. In fact, if I wanted to optimize the deck for an 80 life format, I would make it would be much more streamlined into finding ad nauseum. I feel like not only does increasing the life total even a slight bit push aggro out, which is already much weaker in a multiplayer format, but because of the metagame impact of the lack of aggro and stuff like that, Combo has this seemingly infinite buffer to not have to worry about anything like that, where you don't have to play nearly as many control cards, wrath cards, anything like that. Not to mention that you can jam tons and tons of tutors because of the vintage power of them, but you can play a single Wrath of God and just know that you have time to then tutor your Wrath of God and cast it if you really need to, though 9 times out of 10 you can just race it. Combo's already going to have a natural edge in a multiplayer game, and that when they go off, they're going to kill the table. And the fact that there are 3 opponents instead of 1 isn't going to be a large impact life-wise. Not to mention, Combo more than anyone else uses the kind of cards where you can use your life as a resource to circumvent some things that are naturally problems for the cards. Like when you look at how they designed a card like a Grim Tutor or a Vampiric Tutor or even a Gitaxian Probe, when you have a double life total, it's not like the cost of that is halved. It's almost like it doesn't exist. Because, well, I guess that's not completely true. But it's like that 9 times out of 10, the drawback for that card, the life you have to pay, isn't going to be relevant. And the few times it is relevant, it's still worth using those cards and putting yourself down to 1 or 2 life before you win a game. I feel like if you kicked it back to 20 life, you wouldn't have to have a massively large ban list. And if you really wanted to start a format that was competitive and you wanted people to pick up on it and have fun with it, I think you can't have a ban list that's a zillion cards long. That's part of the reason I think Prismatic died out. I don't think anyone wants to try to remember what 100 cards are on the ban list. And even a card like this, Necropotence, I think you wouldn't necessarily have to ban. Part of the inherent drawback of a card like Necropotence is that you miss your draw step. When you have 40 life at your fingertips instead of 20, I often say this, it's not like you have doubled the amount of times you can activate the Necropotence. It's more than that, because you can go down to 1 and still win. But you're going to have to use life for other things, fetch lands, things of that nature. where maybe you can invest 10 life into a Necropotence when you have 20 life, whereas when you have 40 life, you can invest 30. So it's not linear in that respect. Not to mention the fact that if aggro became a player in the metagame, and people were playing aggressive cards that were just beaters, because you could actually rely on them to kill people, then you have to really worry about using a card like this. Top decking this card a few turns in isn't necessarily good anymore. If you've already fetched a couple times and you have an aggressive deck playing on the table, say someone is playing Rafika the Many, and they played a Noble Hierarch and a Kusali Pride Mage, and they bashed you with their Kusali Pride Mage for 4, and they're about to play a Rafik. Necro isn't going to do you any favors, because all it's going to do, because you don't get the cards end of turn, is say, kill me now. Not to mention, you can't jam pure combo cards and try to go off, especially if you're using something like a Grim Tutor, which I don't think you'd have to ban because it has that drawback of losing 3 life and doesn't have the efficiency of a 1B Tutor in Demonic Tutor, or something of that power level. I feel like cards like this, they wouldn't be a problem, and you wouldn't have to ban them in the first place because they wouldn't be nearly as abusable anymore. A card like Ad Nauseam is you have to build around it quite a bit to break, and it pretty much would not be worth the work. And when you think about the other implications of aggro being a player in the metagame, not only are you going to ban some of these top tier combo cards to kind of balance the playing field, so your Demonic Tutors, your Vampiric Tutors, possibly even your Imperial Seals. A lot of people see those as similar, but I think once you change the life total, it changes the whole name of the game. And top decking an Imperial Seal in a format that's going to be naturally faster because of a lower life total isn't necessarily that great anymore. When you only have 20 life, something like a Kali of the Vast can drop a single creature or 2 creatures and just two-shot someone out of nowhere without doing very much work at all, where you have to try to sift through your deck and find a win. I don't think it would be nearly as much of a problem. The thing about the Rafik I talked before, playing something as simple as a Loxodon Hierarch, and giving it double strike and swinging at someone is putting someone at a very, very low life total, and these kind of cards won't be as much of a problem. It's not just these black cards. Think about something that's incredibly, incredibly powerful in Commander. Staple in green, one of the best green cards because of the double... I spelt wrong? We'll just type it no, because then it'll give me every card with the word library in it. Sylvan. Slyvan? Sylvan. What the fuck? Alright, we're going to do it the hard way because I can't spell for shit. Library. I'm going to show the card just in case someone, for some reason, hasn't seen what a Sylvan Library does. This is a card with 40 life if you're trying to balance competitive. I don't think would be a very fair card, and you'd have to add it to your ban list. Dear God, did I just pass it? Green. Green. Where is my Sylvan Library? Man, I am just blind today. Here it is. Having to pay 4 life for an additional card when you have 40 life is trivial. You can activate this and get 6 extra cards and gladly pay all that life if it digs you into a way to take control of the game and finish it with a combo, or put yourself in a position where you're so far ahead in board state as a control player that it doesn't really matter that you just slaughtered your own life total for 2 reasons. One, aggro isn't a player in the metagame because it typically doesn't work, so there is no, people aren't playing burn as removal to kill you. They're trying to beat you at this card advantage game, and every deck kind of has to play on the same level, where not only is this more than double in what you can abuse the resource of it for how it was intentionally balanced by Wizards of the Coast, but you don't have that element in the metagame that's really threatening you in any way. So there are a lot of these cards like this that are already much stronger in a multiplayer environment in general. Rant-based strategies and things that go over people's head are already an advantage, not just because aggro has to deal more total damage, but because in order for aggro to be fast and pace itself, it has to play lots of cards, and if it's not playing the card advantage game, and it's instead trying to kill people's life total and work off virtual card advantage, let's say you get a pretty balanced table and you get a good table. You get a mid-range player, you get a combo player, you get a control player, and you get an aggro player. That aggro player drops a bunch of his creatures and kills the combo player for the table before they can assemble their combo to kill everybody. it's still not a very good position for them because the mid-range player can still beat them, and the control player can now just drop a Wrath of God, and also the aggro player is very, very far behind. Now, I think part of this is taken care of by the idea that you have a commander, because having a commander, though incredibly broken in general, kind of helps aggro because you always have something that's very strong that you can keep recurring and killing people with. And I kind of think at 20 life, you almost don't need commander damage. I know some people say good for combating life gain combo. Well, honestly, in a competitive metagame, if you're playing an infinite combo, you're probably not playing life gain combo. And even if you are, that just leaves you open to get killed by other combo players. Control players can still lock all of your mana and run you out of cards. It's just not something that I think, unless for the nostalgia of commanderness, you feel like you have to add in, is really that important. Look, I even see other cards I can talk about here. With 20 life, how bad would you feel losing to a Tooth and Nail combo? I wouldn't really feel that bad, because they've invested 9 mana in this competitive metagame to kill you with the Entwine cost, right? Where people can just play cards that are 4 and 5 mana and straightforward and not combo-y and kill you with them. Now, as far as banning cards, I do think you still have to rein in combo, but I think you more than anything have to rein in power level. You rein in the cards that are not only good in combo, you rein in the cards that are just so brutally efficient that they're good in combo, they're good in aggro, they're good in mid-range, the cards that are just way too efficient, the Ancestral Recalls, the Black Lotuses, the Mnemonic Tutors, the kind of cards you're playing in Vintage that you're not playing just because in the metagame like a Dak Faden. The kinds of cards that are just so incredibly powerful for their mana cost, they're just not fair. So part of the way you'd rein in combo is you get rid of some of these ubiquitous tutors, like Vampiric Tutor and the Demonic Tutor, and even to some extent I think you would probably have to axe the Intuition, probably Entomb because of Reanimator. Once you kind of developed a metagame, you can kind of test the strength of the individual archetypes and decks and get a feel for it. This card I think we'd have to ban. And I can already show you a reason right next to it, just looking at random cards that have the word library in them, but I think that'll just sidetrack me. I think you'd have to rein in the superpower cards like Yawgmoth's Will. That would have to eat the axe. But I don't think you'd have to kill some of these enablers. I think you'd still let Storm be a deck and let them keep Mind's Desire, as long as you've got rid of their Soul Rings and their Mana Crypts, and, you know, the Tolarian Academies and the cards that just make them incredibly stupid, to where they're on the same similar speed to aggro, but it's more difficult for them to get there, and they don't really have the consistency. Because not only are you going to be getting rid of the most powerful cards in their deck that make their deck consistent and fast, but they are not going to just get to replace those cards anymore with, excuse me one second while I take a drink. You're not going to get to replace those cards with just weaker versions of them. You're not just going to all of a sudden shove in a Diabolic Tutor and your deck is just a little slower. Those cards are now going to need to be replaced with things that can stop the aggro player from killing you. And you still need enough control to stop the control player from counterspelling you. The life total thing will be the biggest boon to slowing and stopping combo that I can possibly think of. And it will be way more efficient than trying to put, you know, a zillion other combo cards that they may or may not even use on the ban list. I think that would just kind of turn people away from the format. Now, a card like Hermit Druid, I think you would have to axe, simply because you don't want to have tons of cards on your ban list, and there's too many green tutors and creature-based tutors that I don't think are too powerful. Like this card, possibly too powerful, Natural Order. You might have to ban this tutor just because if you don't, you'd have to axe things like the Primeval Titan, the Sylvan Primordial, those kind of cards. You probably have to axe a card like Survival of the Fittest. These are very high-power tutors, though, these right here. Green Sun Zenith is very strong, but I don't think you have to get rid of it. I don't think you have to get rid of Worldly Tutor, or Eladamri's Call, or axing every tutor at a certain mana cost like Prismatic did. I think that would just be the death of things. You still want to be able to have some kind of consistency where people's kind of synergy can kind of really be brought together by these cards that find what you need. So certain cards that are just too powerful that you couldn't fix with a life total like this Hermit Druid here, this would have to go. But the other thing I think would be really interesting is that colors that are kind of weak in Commander right now, with the 40 life total, would become very strong again. Like, imagine how ubiquitous something like Swords to Plowshares is right now for creature removal in the format. Because it's important to exile, and you want to get rid of something big, and because it's mana efficient. Think about how ubiquitous Lightning Bolt is in 20 life formats. A card like Lightning Bolt would be a giant boon to red, and it would give it back its piece of the color pie that's very important. Burn spells, if you think about them in something like a cube, are incredibly powerful, not only because they answer planeswalkers, not only because they serve as removal, but because they can also serve as damage to the face. Currently, you can't really use direct damage efficient spells like that in Commander because the damage to the face is very, very irrelevant. More relevant than people actually think it is right now, even at 40 life. But I think being able to bring those things back into the metagame would really go a long way towards balancing things out. Not to mention the fact that the entire game, the way Wizard designed it, has aggro as part of its balance. When you take out one of those core pillars, you're really messing with things. Now, in a more higher-powered format, when you look at an aggro deck and you look at something like Death and Taxes and Legacy, or a tempo deck like Delver and things like that, when they're trying to combat combo, they're combating combo with 4 Brainstorms in a 60-card format, playing as many fetch lands as they want. They're playing against 4 Lion's Eye Diamonds, or people with Black Lotuses in Vintage. And it's very, very difficult when you can get that kind of 60-deck, 4-of-a-kind consistency, and you get a jam, at least some number of very high-power cards with very specific synergies to stop them from being very fast. But in the same way that combo has a boon of being able to kill a whole table in multiplayer, they're also very much hurt by the 100-card singleton nature of the format, whereas a more straightforward strategy that can use some redundancy in what it's trying to do has a much easier time being able to pull their game plan off, because it's very easy to switch in different pieces of their puzzle and still have their strategy be effective. And I think this will also leave tons of room for other strategies that people love from every kind of casual Magic format ever played, and the stack strategies and the tax strategies and the damage when you draw strategies. These are all based around, all these cards were built around Wizard's idea that people have 20 life. Cards aren't built for 30 life or 40 life or 25. Now, admittedly, most of these cards are balanced for one-on-one, but there are certain cards, like let's say Unnerve. Kind of, I can spell that. To have 2 N's. Unnerve. Oh, it's not green. That would help. It does have 2 N's, though. There are certain cards that Wizards have realized people play multiplayer, decks. And another card that's similar to this is, a Siphon Mind or something like that. Think about how powerful something like Night's Whisper is now, and how easy it is to throw in your deck, and how in a 2-slot compared to a blue draw spell at 2, there aren't many that are that simple, efficient, +1 card that you can just throw in a commander without even thinking about, because the 2 life doesn't cost you anything. Well, it costs you something, but it doesn't cost you nearly as much as it was supposed to when they designed and balanced the card. And you could very easily want to play a card like Siphon Mind and draw 3 and make everyone lose a card and not lose life, then lose your natural draw with a card like Necropotence, depending on your strategy. Not to say that this card would all of a sudden be bad. I think this card would still be very, very strong, but in certain metagames it wouldn't be nearly as strong as it is now. The drawbacks of losing your graveyard and skipping your draw step and losing life are much, much, much more significant when you have the life total the game was intended to be. This card is still too strong in something like Vintage when you're drawing into a power card like a Black Lotus, or when you're just getting ahead in a one-on-one and just having 4 more cards than your opponent seals a game. But when it paints a giant target on your head and you've got multiple aggressive or mid-range decks all trying to kill you, if you don't have a board state developed behind this, or you've already taken damage, this card could easily be dead. I'm not sure exactly how you'd balance the commanders. The commanders would be the most difficult thing to balance in the game period. I think you would definitely have to, even though it's not as simple and as graceful as the current ban list did with getting rid of Banned as Commander, I think you'd almost have to use Banned as Commander, because there's some commanders that are just stupid. I think, continuing on my life total rant here, something like Aloro would be twice as powerful as it is now at a 20 life format. I mean, now you have a commander that is invalidating the life total we just dropped, and he does his job for 0 mana from the command zone, and he's untouchable. You can't stop his effect. That alone, even in multiplayer, I think that would just be too strong for a control shell. And that same color pie, whether or not you ban the Necropotence, Zur the Enchanter is a kind of card that would cheat your getting rid of some of the most efficient tutor rules in a very, very mean way. Zura is just a disgusting general, period. And I think, things like that, like Ureo, that you can just flip and just win a game. Dumb stuff like that would have to be banned. I think I don't know exactly how many commanders you have to ban it. And you definitely have to test it a little bit. But I think you'd definitely be banning quite a few commanders. When I was looking over the thread the other day, the guy was suggesting, how would you build this the other day? Someone had a ban list that made a lot of sense, but it had tons and tons and tons more cards on it that I think it would need to balance the format. And I kind of agree with the sentiment that if you're trying to really start something like this up, I would start small and then kind of build up. I would get rid of the vintage power cards for sure. I would probably try to get rid of all the super powered cards played in the vintage. To make this not a 100-card vintage, I would pretty much want to kill every card in vintage that makes vintage vintage. All the Library of Alexandrias, all the cards that, all the Black Lotuses, all the cards that define that format, and not just the cards that combat them. So no, you don't have to ban a singleton mental misstep that everyone uses to stop the ancestral recalls. But you call the vampiric tutors and the mystical tutors and the things of that, and the gifts ungiven, and those kind of things that are just insanely powerful, so that there's less power level gap between the cards in your pool. But I think what's kind of exciting about an idea like this is that you would get to play with the cards from the entire card pool of all of Magic. So you don't really need to worry about, I need to go get this net deck or this or that. And I think that would, be appealing in that you can build a deck with any set of cards you ever want, and you can build it any way, any standard or modern or any kind of deck you ever dreamed of. As long as the archetypes are balanced, you can almost go off on any idea. And as long as you still have the commander to build around and a commander to be unique, there are a limitless number of effective builds. And I think that the nature of multiplayer and the strategy and the politics and the things that a lot of people like about multiplayer Commander in general would still be there. But I think you can't try to make the game competitive and make it super slow like it is in traditional Commander, because without a social contract, you just literally cannot ban enough cards to do it that way. I think you have to speed the format up in terms of lowering the life total. I'm not sure completely every card you'd need to ban or every strategy you'd need to cull. It would definitely be a process, and certain cards and decks would emerge as super, super strong, and you could take cues from other formats and you could ban out things like a Winter Orb or something like that. Armageddons or things you think people don't like, but really if you're just trying to balance it, you just really get rid of the high power cards in each strategy that make them way, way, way too oppressive. And I think you can't take all the cues, right? Because something like a Mind Twist being banned or restricted or something like that is very specific to one-on-one. And I think there'd be very specific cards to multiplayer, like the trade secrets from, possible collusion, or just not even collusion, but just you're put in a position where you think someone else is going to win, and now you have a 3-mana card that reads either me or this guy wins, not the person who's winning, who have invalidate earlier parts of the game. It would definitely be a tricky prospect, but I really can't see it working with even 25 life. If aggro is not a part of the metagame, I feel like it just all crumbles. I don't know how you completely incentivize aggro. I don't think you can ever play it in the way that you do in most formats where you want to play a 2-1 on turn 1 like you would in Cube or something. But if you bring the life total down to 20, I could see an aggressive Purifos God of the Forge deck easily trading blows with a combo deck with very, very few bans without banning some of the most prominent and overpowered cards with the way Commander's currently structured. And what you'd end up with, and I don't know if this is what people would want or not, is not something that looks like Commander at all. Not something where you necessarily only make the big plays and only win based on how many cards are in someone's hand, but somewhere where all strategies can thrive. You have better color balance because you're not restricting some of the powers of one colors or magnifying the powers of other colors, like blue being massively magnified by the fact that they're the card advantage color and the counterspell color, and everything's revolving around combos, so it just kind of exacerbates the problem and gets worse and worse. Or something like being in red-white is really strong, and I don't even think you have to act something like Skull Clamp, because aggro already being at a disadvantage, I'm kind of okay with the color balance idea of you going, okay, equipment tutor into Skull Clamp in my aggressive deck so that I can play some kind of cool Boros commander, because I still think those guys are kind of underdogs. And I think like other formats, you kind of balance based on archetypes and individual decks. It's kind of okay if they have some kind of slightly overpowered cards that aren't quite vintage power, if they slot better into decks that's strategy isn't overwhelmingly powerful, especially when you're getting rid of superpower tutors where you can't grab them without paying some kind of investment, be it life or mana or something else, card advantage to the top of your deck. You know, maybe Enlightened Tutor isn't something that you can play with, but I don't think Steel Shaper's Gift is something you have to get rid of. I could probably rant for a long, long time about this, but really the main thing I wanted to say was I think if you want to make it work, you need to pull the life totals all the way down. I would love it if someone actually did this. I don't think I would ever dedicate the time to actually helping someone do this. But if someone ever made a format like this, I would definitely play it. And I will definitely run by my play group personally if they'd like to try one of this on one of our EDH nights. We play less than we used to, so I don't know if they'll want to build a whole new deck for it or not. But I'm usually pretty good at getting them hyped up to try new things with me. And if we're playing at my house, it's my rules anyway. They can suck my dick. Moxnix signing out.